And one great thing that we were able to create was a suicide prevention coalition for our community. And once we did that, we worked with our community partners. We worked with SAMHSA. SAMHSA came down and did the crisis intercept mapping for us and really worked with our community partners. And from that starting point, we were able to really house and fully commit to a suicide prevention coalition. And we do that in conjunction with a lot of our community members here and Mercer University. So we have a partner from a university that kind of helps and runs, and she facilitates that. That's Dr. Kimberly Roth. And so we meet monthly to come up with ideas of what we can do to really bring awareness to suicide, what prevention tactics and methods we can use, what can we do to help build our community, what trainings we could offer, or what the community needs would be, so that way we can offer things to help them.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brighter Together podcast. My name is Janet Courtney, and my special guest today is Melanie Ann Pass. Melanie Ann is the project director of trauma-informed support services at Liberty County School District, and that's in Hinesville, Georgia, which I found out is near Savannah. So, Melanie Ann, we are super excited to have you on the show.
Well, thank you for the invite, and it's a pleasure to be here today.
Awesome. So tell our listeners a little bit about, because this is a little bit, we talk about multi-tiered system of support, which is kind of sounds like something close to that, but it's a little bit different, right? So tell us what you do, how it came about, and a little bit about Liberty.
Sure. So I can start with our demographics for Liberty County School System. We are a district of close to 11,000 students. We are the most affordable housing from Savannah, Bryan County to Hinesville or Liberty County. So we have a lot of influx or increase in our population for people moving here. I would say our enrollment is up probably close to 1,000 this school year. So we are really growing. A lot of people that may have been here before in Hinesville, Georgia, was very not as built up as it is today. So we're moving right along pretty fast and rapidly as far as our growth. We have, like I said, about 11,000 students. We have 2 high schools, 3 middle schools, 7 elementary schools, 1 career academy, and 1 alternative program in our school district. We are the school district that supports Fort Stewart's in grade 7 through 12 that live on post. And then for the students that live off post, which would be about 70% of the military families that live off post, will be around, we support them through pre-K through 12th grade.
Wow.
And prior to my position here, I was the military coordinator for the school district. And in that capacity or in that role, I helped facilitate the military interstate compact. So students, especially our high school students, wouldn't be impacted by having to take another class or a class that didn't fit into their graduation requirements, but could have been the same coursework that they've done in another state when they moved here, because we do have a lot of students that are moving quite frequently. And I would say maybe 2 to 3 years, depending on, their military members' position here at the installation. So sometimes that is impacted because people don't place them in the right classes. They're unsure how to place them. They're telling them they can't meet the state's graduation requirement. And so with that being said, we were able to really work out our compacts overseas, in state, and really get those students on track to graduate.
Great.
With that being said, this is my 9th year here in Liberty County. I moved down here from Virginia, and, this is the furthest south I've been. So it was really different, moving from another state to Georgia and learning about their education. And I really think Georgia has a great education system. They have the Hope Scholarship, the Zell Miller Scholarship. So when students receive a certain GPA, when they graduate, they're eligible to have like scholarships to help them in their post-secondary. So I think it's really, really a brilliant thing that Georgia is putting the post-secondary education back into Georgia and their schools and universities. Since I've been here as a military coordinator, you never think as an educator you would go through something like COVID. And during COVID, Um, we just everybody was probably at a standstill, like, "What do you do? How do you educate these kids? What is our plan?" And to kinda gather and get everything together to work, school district out was a lot. And I think the big part was, students being isolated from their after-school activities, students seeing a lot of, families that, members or people that had passed away from COVID, and just, kinda just being isolated, I think, and not being able to do a lot of things that they would normally do. I think school connectedness is important when you're looking at, students in schools, and for kids to feel connected, they come to school, they're increased attendance, they're able to join different activities, they're able to identify trusted adults. And during that time, we had a lot of students who were struggling, internally and externally, emotionally. And so we did have we did have a few suicides during that time from our
Mm,
students. And, for me, it was like, what do you do? Like, I can sit here and say, I'm sorry to parents or, that was a terrible thing, which it is. But, on a deeper level for myself, it was like, what can you do to kind of help and really change or impact students, impact community? Uh, as I mentioned before, moving from a different state to this state, it was a big eye opener for me because resources were limited. Clinicians weren't readily available. Insurance was different down here. I came from Virginia where, if you had Medicaid, you got immediate services. They were service providers readily available. If you had a crisis, your community service board would come out and assess the crisis, and we were able to move students and families. And then maybe coming to more of a rural area or may be another state that didn't have as many resources was really hard to navigate those mental health concerns and problems. So that's something that I really, really honed in on and like, hey, what can we do? From that point, I kind of went to reach out to people from the state level, like Department of Behavioral Health. Like, hey, do you have anything that you could provide for suicide prevention? Like, what can we do to really work with students, work with families, work with people that are struggling, but they may not be, telling you, hey, I'm struggling. They're kind of suffering in silence. Or they may be that model student that might be a perfect student that you look at to say, hey, they're involved in ABC extracurricular activities, they get good grades, they're almost a perfectionist, but you don't know how they're struggling internally.
right.
So those are some of the factors and some of the things that I was looking at to say, hey, what can we do to really help our community? Um, and that was a battle. So that, sometimes, you get help from your Department of Mental Health and, really trying to figure out, what can you do to move your community, move your school system forward, and how can you help provide some type
Right.
of intervention and prevention for students. And I will say sometimes your community may not be ready to acknowledge that there is a problem. They may not be ready to work together. And so trying to get everybody to work together was a I don't want to say battle, but it was a real accomplishment. One thing that I started to notice was, we are a military community, but we have the highest veteran population in the state of Georgia. So Hinesville, at
Um,
the time we were looking at our statistics, was about 26% of veteran population for
wow.
Hinesville. And then in that case, we had a lot of veteran suicides pass during COVID. A lot of struggles. And then for some families, this is like their first duty station. And so things that they are struggling with as a new, military spouse or, just entering the military is different. Um,
Mhm.
so you kind of look at those factors too. And one great thing that we were able to create was a suicide prevention coalition for our community. And once we did that, we worked with our community partners. We worked with SAMHSA. SAMHSA came down and did the crisis intercept mapping for us and really worked with our community partners. And from that starting point, we were able to really house and fully commit to a suicide prevention coalition, and we do that in conjunction with a lot of our community members here and Mercer University. So we have a partner from a university that kind of helps and runs, and she facilitates that. That's Dr. Kimberly Roth. And so we meet monthly to come up with ideas of what we can do to really bring awareness to suicide, what prevention tactics and methods we can use, what can we do to help build our community, what trainings we could offer, or what the community needs would be, so that way we can offer things to help them. So I know we recently did a needs assessment for our community, and I feel that the Suicide Prevention Coalition kind of takes care of our adults in our community, because when you have veterans or you have a lot of suicides in your community that are dying by suicide, those are our family members to our students. Those are,
Oh,
parents.
right. Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
it really impacts students. And
Mhm.
so, we got that up and running, and that was a big that was a lot of work. And then from there, you kinda reach out to your Department of Education to say, "Hey, can you connect me? What can we do to get possibly some grants?" Because everybody that's working in a school district knows money is limited. Sometimes money may not be readily available to provide services or provide, personnel to help with that. So
Mhm.
luckily, we were able to partner with a few people. The state had introduced me to some folks, and then I ended up meeting our evaluator, Dr. Emily Graybill. At that time, she was from Georgia State University. Now she's a professor at Rutgers, and so we were able to partner and all come together to work on this grant. And then, if it wasn't for her, we wouldn't be able to really have our grant up and running. And in addition to that, we worked with Fraser Counseling Center, which is a nonprofit counseling agency in our area that will come and provide services. So right now, I'm currently the project director for the Trauma Informed Support Services, and our project title name is Project Wellness and Wellbeing for Liberty County. Back in 2023, we were awarded the grant, and it was close to $1 million a year for 4 years. And that was for us to really build a tiered infrastructure under MTSS, which is a
MTSS. Yeah.
system of support,
Right. Mhm.
because social and emotional learning really blew up during COVID. Like, hey,
Yes.
what do we do? What is social emotional learning? What does it look like? How can we really provide those intervention and prevention methods to students? Um, so that's something that we're currently trying to do is really build into our system, really work with our other partners under the MTSS program, which will be academics and behavior. And next year, the Georgia Department of Education is rolling out that all school districts have to align toward the Georgia MTSS process. And so, in theory, it sounds really great in theory,
Mhm.
but
Right.
during application is really, really hard, because sometimes people tend to continuously work in their own little silos. So it's like, how do we merge it? And so with the grant, I feel like the grant has really helped us really execute things and really get a great infrastructure going down. When you get a federal grant from SAMHSA, I feel like my first year really wasn't a year of working it. It was a year of hiring personnel, doing all the training, just figuring out what you're doing, trying to get your feet on the ground running, building the plane as you're ready to take off. And
Is there
so that
flying it, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
and so that
Exactly.
was really, really a hard year. And then, sometimes when you do grant work, a lot of people don't understand that it's always changing. You're always backing up, fixing it, thinking of a better method, a better framework on how you can execute things, learning from your mistakes. And sometimes for people who don't have a lot of resiliency, it could be hard. So it could be a very hard job for them to really understand and comprehend. And I think that's just the beauty of grant work is just, learning and learning from your mistakes, piloting out small and trying to add on to bigger pieces. And that's currently, what we're doing. We are in our third year of our grant. It really has gone by so fast.
Yes.
Um, and, under the MTSS process, which is a multi-tiered system of supports, I'll kind of explain
Mhm.
it in case people who aren't familiar with education will kind of understand what it is. So, as I mentioned previously, we have about 11,000 students. So if you have students who may need social emotional learning, it's really hard to service 11,000 students. So what you want to do is build a really strong foundation, and that would be your tier one. And that would be having everybody in the school really practice and model that behavior. And then also working with your PBIS, your positive behavior intervention supports, to really, really work on the behaviors, really put out the social emotional and think. and then your academics. We found that a lot of students who are struggling academically have a lot of underlying problems, and that could be, emotional dysregulation, that could be a lot of family problems. And I also think with the generation of social media, is everything is so readily available to them. And, they have a short attention spans, a lot of things they want to I don't wanna say cyberbully, but sometimes maybe, lack of better words, cyberbully other kids, and then it comes into the school system because they can say what they wanna say on social media, they can provoke who they wanna provoke on social media, and then sometimes it gets back, and then that becomes another issue, for us in the in the school system.
For
So
sure.
with those issues, coming about, with the social media, it's been really tough. I grew up in an era where I didn't have social media, so sometimes,
Me too. Yeah.
and it is addictive because I find myself scrolling at night and I'm like, "Okay, I need to be in the bed." Um, but just having, the lack of I would say I don't wanna say communication, but the lack of talking it out, resolving problems, conflict
Yeah.
resolution.
There's a big difference between being supported by somebody who's walked in your shoes and someone who hasn't. At Lighthouse Therapy, our leadership team is made up of experienced clinicians who've actually worked in schools. We understand the pressure you're under and what real support looks like. That's why our therapy solutions, whether it be virtual, hybrid, or in person, are built with you in mind. No complicated systems or red tape, just streamlined support and seasoned therapists who are ready to make a difference. Learn more at lighthouse-therapy.com/brighter together. I've said that before on the show. I don't know how many times. Social media is ruining communication. It really is.
Yeah.
Because there are so many pieces to communication that you just don't get on social media. And you're getting the text, and that's, you're getting what's the print that's on the phone, or the funny meme or whatever, but it's not communication. It is not communication. Communication is so much more complex. Pragmatics, that whole pragmatics piece is just pulled out when you look at social media. And so you get it's like looking at something that's three-dimensional in one dimension, you know? So anyway.
Yes, and I also think too it's a matter of interpretation because
Oh yeah.
some people
Mhm.
interpret things differently,
Mhm.
so, you
And the
know
message can be misinterpreted
Right.
because you are only looking at one dimension, you know? So much of what we do all day for communication is not just the words. It's, I talk with my hands, and you get intonation and prosody and all of those things. And when you pull all of that out of communication, it's flat and you miss half of it. And kids do not have the skills, do not have the social emotional ability to interpret those in a way without saying, "Oh, she's attacking me," when she may not have been. He or she, I shouldn't just say she, but yeah. So it's definitely, I agree with you 1000%. It drives me crazy. Obviously, I got on a soapbox there. So there you
Yeah,
go.
it's a battle, and
Yeah.
then I think Georgia is having the ban of cell phones,
Mhm.
in
Texas too.
schools. So what we've tried to do to really kinda, really work on that this school year and last school year was to have the little pouches where they have to put their cell phone in a pouch and it's magnetic. They can only open it at the end of the day. They have certain areas where they can, put it on a magnet and it unlocks it. And so that's something that we were doing. But the kids are really smart nowadays. So they'll buy the big magnet on Amazon and unlock it or hit it and then it unlocks. So they're really brilliant out here. But that's something that again, going back to the grant work is what we're trying to do is build that strong tier one. And we're
Right.
targeting 80%, really 100%, but our target would be 80%. And then also we're screening students. So we're also screening students through a universal screener. And I just want to make it clear it's not a mental health screener, it's just a universal screener to see what they're
Mhm.
struggling in. If they're struggling with little anxiety or if they're, looking at the behavior, certain behaviors, things like that. So what we're trying to do is really identify students who need help through that screener. And then once we have those students that are identified, we have a interview with them to say, hey, remember that screener we did back in September? Do you feel like you might need more support or is there someone you can talk to. It's just a series of maybe little questions like that. And then sometimes those students will kind of open up and say, yeah, I think I might need a little support because I'm struggling, or, I'm transitioning, or, something happened. And then we're able to kind of help identify students who are struggling internally and externally. And what I mean by that is internally, meaning emotionally, and then externally, sometimes behavior. Because sometimes you'll see a lot of external behaviors, but you won't capture those kids who are good kids, but they may not show up as behavior problems.
Right.
Um,
But they have all of this internal stuff going on. Yeah.
Yes. So
Mhm.
what we try to do is really drive that data down by interviews, talking to their school counselors, looking at their attendance, looking at other data points to say, hey, what students could benefit the most from a tier two. And a tier two would be our like intervention prevention, which would be a small group setting, maybe a check-in, check-out, providing an extra layer of support to those students who might just need that little bit of additional support. And we're targeting 15% of our population at that point. And then our tier three would be the students who need the most support, which would be our other partner, Fraser Counseling, will bring in the clinicians, and they would come to the schools to service those students. So we do have a referral tracker process that we're trying to do a centralized referral.
Mhm.
And, so far we've done about 95 students this year that have been referred to us. And sometimes, we have a team, and our multidisciplinary team looks at it, reviews it. We may send it back to the school to ask more questions. Or we may say, hey, this is a tier two issue. Maybe you could put them in a small group. Maybe you could assign the student a mentor and do a check in and check out. Um, and then going back to our tier three, if they do need that last layer of support, they will go, the clinician will come out and see that student into our schools. And it is free to our students. We are a high poverty area. Everybody this year receives free lunch and free breakfast. Before that, it was about 68% of free and reduced lunch for our school district. So we knew that, paying for additional mental health supports would be kind of impossible for some students. They may not have the insurance. They may be temporarily living with a family member due to another situation. So we are able to really compensate and pick up the cost for that clinical help. And so that's really been a big thing for us. And then our clinicians are trained or certified in trauma focused cognitive behavior therapy, and they're able to really work with those students. And then in our tier two groups, we really trained our social workers, our school counselors to really provide some skills to our students, because what we find out, the common theme when we look at referrals, were loss. A lot of students have a loss of a parent, a relative, a sibling, somebody very significant and close to them. And we also kind of incorporated a local agency to come in called Kate's Club to kind of help, work with our students, to work with them in regards to a family loss, or a death of somebody. A grief was a big issue. And then we also found out that, a lot of students are just really struggling. We have a lot of students who have a lot of different family dynamics, and then, that would cause a lot of other underlying issues and behavioral issues. So, we really are working to really help students. And, sometimes you have staff members that need help. You have, people in our own little group of what we're our grant trauma work that we're doing that, need help. And it's just, you're not alone. So, sometimes I would think, hey, maybe you'd feel alone out here. But I would say a lot of people would need the support. And it's just a great opportunity for us to be able to have the financial means to really support students and families in our school district, and to really also work with our community partners. One part of our grant is a cooperative agreement. So we really work out here and train our other partners, like our early childhood education centers, really working in conjunction with Fort Stewart, behavioral health, or really working with like EFMP at Fort Stewart, which was the Exceptional Family Members Program at Fort Stewart, to really get them trained. So what I kind of do as a project director is really engage in my community piece and really cross train. So when I have certain trainings, I know other agencies may not have the funding to support that. So I will pay for it and have them come to our training so they could redeliver that
Nice.
therapy or whatever skills or prevention intervention techniques that they need to their agency or to help service students. A huge goal for us is to have therapy or um, all year. So, we're working over the summer. People think summertime, is our downtime, but honestly, in education is my most busiest time
Mhm.
because we're
Mhm.
prepping, we're training, we're, doing classwork or not classwork, but we're actually teaching classes during our summer institute to teachers who may not know about trauma informed practices. Our goal in our district is to have everybody trauma informed in our school district so they know that trauma is there, the three different types of trauma, and then what behaviors to look for and how to deal with it. Because sometimes people may raise their voice or kind of yell, and that could be a trigger for a kid that may have trauma or
Mhm.
may not understand why the student is missing so much time or why the student has uh, been absent for so many days. So, anything that we can do to connect services, connect,
Yeah.
you know, uh, kind of like a wraparound service is, our one of our main goals here for the grant.
Amazing, amazing. So, you were talking you said the name of where the grant came from. Can you give me just a little bit more, like, how did you know to go there to get that grant?
Okay, so it- to my knowledge, I'm not an expert, but to my knowledge, I know it's two mental health grants out through SAMHSA.
Yeah,
Um,
SAMHSA. What is SAMHSA? Tell me what SAMHSA
SAMHSA,
is.
oh, you would ask me and my brain would forget.
That's okay, that's okay. It's, if you
Substance
can.
Abuse Mental Health Administration. I probably don't have the acronym correct, but I do believe that's what it is, and that is a federal agency, so most of your grants are gonna run through the federal agency. And their goal is to provide prevention for substance abuse, mental health, things like
Gotcha.
that.
Okay,
And so, luckily for the state of Georgia, they had the Project Aware grant going on, and a lot of our, localities here had the Project Aware. And so TIS is kind of like the baby grant to Project Aware. They're a 5-year grant, we're a 4-year grant. We
okay,
are a service grant, so we are providing direct services to students
okay.
and working with them. And so we were able to, apply for that. It's a long process, just
I
like
know,
trying
yeah.
to
Yeah,
upload, make sure you have your wording right, make sure you have the titles to your uploads right, make sure you have everything correct was was a beast.
yeah.
It's a lot of work. And then me switching into my role, because I didn't think I mentioned this, but my background is school counselor. So I was a school counselor for so many
Okay,
years
that makes sense, yeah.
and then, was able to really help in that role as a military coordinator because I knew about high school Carnegie units, graduation requirements, all that great stuff. And then
Mhm.
really kind of working into that social emotional piece and academics and career, the domains that we use as school counselors, for the grant, especially honing in on that social emotional learning. So it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work trying to get everything together. And I could
Yeah.
not have done it without, Rutgers.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing. So you're making such an incredible impact on the students and where, what's gonna, keeping them from making a decision that is not. I mean, they make that decision to kill themselves, and that's it, right? It's tragic. So tragic.
Yeah, and I think just the additional support that students
Mhm.
need because, here in our community, you have a lot of one parent families, you have a lot of grandparents raising parents, and I
Mm,
think just I'm a different generation, but, looking at back, like, if I had to be a teenager now, it would be very hard to be a
yeah.
teenager,
Yeah.
because I think they have more challenges than what I had growing up. And, just the ability to have that safe space, to have that trusted adult, to really know that if you need help, somebody at school is there that cares about you and they're going to get you the help that you need. And,
Yeah.
and I'll be honest with you, I feel like all educators are there, are trusted adults and really care about students and really want to connect them to services or connect them to help. So,
Yeah, it's definitely a service industry where you have to have some compassion to be an educator for sure.
Yes,
It's not easy.
not easy. It's
It's
not
not an easy job, that's for sure. Well, I know we're almost out of time, but I'm so impressed with what you guys are doing. I know that you're changing a generation. I know that you've got identification in place and you're helping these students. If someone has a question, where would they go about finding you or finding this grant? Or just give me a little, like, to give our listeners. I always tell people, tell us how we find out more about your school. Well, you have very specific like things. So, but I'm sure there are others that have questions. Where would they go?
You could go to our district website, which is www.liberty.k12.ga.us.
Okay.
And then there, if you go under student services, you'll find we have a page attached called TIS. And definitely you could reach out. If you have any questions, you could reach out. If anybody's listening and is interested in the SAMHSA grants, they have a SAMHSA forecaster that you can go to, or just Google SAMHSA, and then you can look at the grants available. And
And
then they
SAMHSA, is it SAMSA? Is that what?
HSA. Hold on, let me write it down.
I just want to make
SAMHSA, SAMHSA,
Okay, SAMHSA.
and it should be a grant forecaster out there that they could look at. I would also maybe talk to your local universities or colleges,
Mm.
because you always have an evaluator or researcher that may know something that could assist you. Luckily for me, I was able to link up with Dr. Graybill, and that really helped because you really have to have somebody experienced to kind of guide you. It was a whirlwind for me to become a project director. I've had a lot of jobs. I was a career switcher prior to becoming a school counselor, and I tell everybody this is probably the hardest job I've ever had, trying to get people to, see your vision, change their mindset, really work, for students and things like that. So it's hard. It's not an easy job.
Yeah, but you're doing it, and you're doing it for those kids and the adults too. And I love your passion and what you guys are doing. It's so important. It's so impactful to this generation and so needed. So thank you, Melanie, and for your passion and for fighting for these kids. It's just from the conversation, I know it's still not easy, but you're still doing it. So keep up the good work. Just it's so sad when kids can't learn because of something that's going on, and the fact that they have a place to go is so important. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, it was been great to have you on Brighter Together. I know that people will probably have questions for you, so I look forward to other people learning, because this is the whole point of Brighter Together, is to give people information exactly like what you're doing, so that we can help more kids, because this goes out and you never know. You never know who else is going to listen to this and have an opportunity to go, oh, I can do that. I can help my kids too. And that's it's not a number that I know I'll ever be able to put on this side of heaven, but I know that things are changing because of the good things that schools are doing. And so keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you.